I think the headline, "Scientist Creates Life," is going to have a seismic impact on our culture. When you can sit there and say, I'm going to take base pairs of DNA and arrange them in some kind of a sequence that makes a bit of inorganic matter come alive, you're doing something that's unbelievably important in terms of our understanding that life boils down to biological processes, nothing magical, nothing ineffable, and something pretty scary.
Welcome back to Creating Synthetic Life, your questions answered. I'm Paula Zahn. Let's take a look now at the ethics of man-made life. I'm joined once again by genome scientist Dr. J. Craig Venter, the man who led the team creating the world's first synthetic life. And joining us again is bioethicist Dr. Robert Klitzman of Columbia University, journalist and writer for The New Yorker, Michael Spector. And joining us now is Father Nicanor Austriaco. Good to have you all back with us. Welcome aboard.
Thanks.
Should we be doing this? Should we be messing with life?
Well, I think the best way to answer that is to go back to the words of Pope John Paul II. And he was addressing the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, and he wanted to point out that we must first appreciate that science is a vocation, and that scientists have been given a responsibility, a great privilege to discover truth in service of the common good, especially in service of the dignity of the human person. And so the recent Vatican statement on Dr. Venter's discovery has pointed out, it has welcomed this discovery, but again, it's cautious.
Before you go any further, why don't I share that with the audience right now, because I have a part of that statement, and it reads, "It is a great scientific discovery. Now we have to understand how it will be implemented in the future. If we ascertain that it is for the good of all, of the environment and the man in it, we'll keep the same judgment. If, on the other hand, the use of this discovery should turn against the dignity of and respect for human life, then our judgment would change."
Exactly.
It sounds to me like the Vatican's trying to have it both ways here.
Well, I think what the...
Because we really don't know what the ultimate impact of this technology
So I think what the Vatican is saying is that God has given us reason for us to discover the beauty of his creation and to use that for the benefit of each other. And this is certainly one of those innovations that has great promise. Nonetheless, as we've learned from history, things that have great promise could also bring unexpected consequences. And I think the Vatican is very cautious. It's encouraging. It's saying this is something we should pursue. But throughout the process of pursuing this, we should always be careful that in whatever we're doing with this technology, we are trying to serve and respect the dignity of the human person.
Are you playing God, Craig?
You know, playing God is a cliche that comes up every time there's a new advance, particularly in biology or medical sciences. So we've been hearing this actually for a few centuries at least. So no, we're not. We're trying to understand the basis of life at its most fundamental levels. That's important if we're ever going to try and solve diseases, change how we live on this planet without destroying it. Mastering life is something that man has been trying to do since the earliest stages of our advanced evolution.
I understand what you're saying, but there are a lot of people out there, and I read it on blogs all the time, who are terrified by what this latest breakthrough represents. That you now have the ability to manipulate cells, which we have had for a while, but you're creating life. And they're uncomfortable with that.
I think if we get to the point way down the line where we can now say we're going to make a human being, we're going to take the computer, and it's the same technology, just booted up times a million, and instead of a 1 million set of letters in the DNA, we have 3 billion letters, which is not that much more, and we say I'm going to make a human being. And now I want my human being to have blonde hair and blue eyes, and I want it to have the gene for, if we find a gene for athleticism, or if we find a gene for intelligence, and I don't want it to have these genes, and I want it to be a boy, not a girl.
Oh, well, how do you feel about that? I find that scary. Do you find that scary?
Listen,
it may be an old conversation, but we've got new science that has sparked new fears.
When they cloned a lamb about 15 years ago, everyone said, oh my God, they're going to clone animals, and then people are going to be cloned, and you're going to make a mini-me. No one said, gee, maybe we'd be able to grow a liver so that if you had liver cancer, you could survive. So far, we haven't made any mini-me's. I mean, it doesn't mean that these things aren't worth discussing or they're not possible, but we always discuss the least probable, most theoretically distant possibility.
But how improbable is this?
I don't know,
How many years
improbable-
will it be
how
before you could
improbable
create
is
a
it?
human being through this technology?
How many
It
years
won't happen
will it...
in my lifetime, and I doubt that it'll happen in anybody that's alive today. No, there's no motivation to do it, number one. Why would you want to do it?
There are always people that have fantasies about creating the perfect human being, free of
How many
disease,
years
to look
is
a
it going to
certain
be
way.
before the world goes out of business because of environmental degradation? Now, if we can use this discovery to put that off and reverse what we've done, hey, I'm all for that, and I'll bet the Vatican would be too.
But I'd like to bring it back. You know, it's the trouble I have with ethicists that take a tiny bacteria and leap several light years to human, okay? These are you can't see these organisms with your naked eye. Nobody's doing this with the intention of building humans. This is always the problem with these kind of discussions, is people leap to their science fiction fears because that's how we get our education in this country, from Hollywood movies, not from science classes. It is so far-fetched to go from what we did to modifying or synthesizing a human genome. We might as well be talking about, you know, growing new life on Mars, because that's much more likely.
We acknowledged earlier on that there have got to be some limitations in place when it comes to regulating this technology. And I want you to clearly state for us, all of you, as simply as you can, what those regulations should be that should be in place that could prevent a disaster, either an accident in a lab or a gene mutating beyond our imagination.
I think the most important thing is there should not be an ability for that, whatever you're creating, to replicate outside the lab. So you build it so that if it's outside the lab, it dies. If it's outside the dish, it dies.
I agree with you. That's extremely important. The problem is that organisms are in the business of getting around whatever protections you have. So just like every month I should download on my computer a virus protection, the reason I have to do it every month, and I should probably do it more often, is because people are out there figuring out how to get around whatever the firewalls are. So the issue of if we can have the virus, what's that?
You used the wrong software.
I used the wrong software, right.
And bacteria don't evolve at that rate. So, I mean, you know, it's important because this is important to people, and they are challenged in thinking about this because it's new information, to keep it in the realm of what has actually happened and what is possible. We just finished talking about whether all these good things that are potential to come out of this are possible. What we're talking about now are so many orders of magnitude further away than coming up with new sources of food, fuel, and medicine that it's not even in the same context.
Father, let me ask Father a question. Father, who should be in control of this technology?
Well, I think this is a conversation that our civilization, our society should be having at multiple levels. Dr. Venter has talked about how we are so quick to move from a mycoplasma to a human being. And this is not, especially from a religious and particularly a Catholic perspective, this is a massive abyss that you have to cross, and that the ethics of surrounding technology where you're just manipulating cells in the dish is very, very different from the type of moral questions and ethics that you would have to raise when you're dealing with manipulating human beings.
I think there's another extremely controversial issue we need to address, and that is the issue of who should own this technology. Now, I'm sitting back, and I know over the years you've gotten government funding as well as put a lot of your own dollars into this research, and I'm saying if you are ultimately able to do the wondrous things you're talking about, whether the government should be getting some payback from you, and whether you should ultimately be able to patent this technology.
Well, this is a question as old as technology in this country, and patents are an important part of what our government does, and most governments do, to reward inventors for their discoveries. And it's a minimal period of time for having a monopoly on that invention. In this case, if you want to understand how to do what we did and you want to own it, read our scientific paper and go reproduce it. It's an intellectual idea. So right now we've made it so everybody can own that idea and own that process.
Let's talk about the finances of this breakthrough. Who should own it?
I think there are
issues. It's been privately financed, so let's make that pretty clear. The government,
some would argue
the government funded the early work in 2003 for the first virus. I pay a lot of taxes. Anybody that makes a product based on this will be paying a lot of taxes. Anybody that gets the virus as a vaccine is going to have their life potentially saved. I'd say that's pretty good value back to society. It's not a matter of whose pocket cash goes into. It's a matter of what's the benefit to
If
society.
synthetic genomics can make fuel that will power our world without also destroying it, I'm fine with Craig being a billionaire. It's fun. It's worth it. It's worth it to all of us. You know, to talk
it's
about...
not my goal in life. My goal in life
sure
is actually to have something that works. That would be far more valuable than more money in my pocket.
But the thing is, I think with inventors, if you don't encourage them in, I believe, monetary ways, you're going to find them less interested in doing this sort of work.
The Supreme Court ruled many decades ago that you can patent life, naturally occurring life. I've never liked that notion. But this is clearly the first human-made life form. This is clearly a human invention. This will change the patent rules. And I think it's going to cause a rethinking of this whole process.